Yes, I'm one of those people. I'm an ad salesperson. According to James, someone that everyone hates. Yeah. Thank you for inviting me to this Congress. It's a pleasure to be here and meet with you. You may have heard that Eric Garcetti, the new U.S. ambassador to India, has just been confirmed. Ambassador Garcetti was most recently the mayor of the city of Los Angeles, where my company is headquarters. I hope that both the new ambassador and I will do a good job of representing the United States. Why am I talking with you today about global publishers leveraging advertising with magazine brands in the U.S.? Because my company's broad experience selling advertising over the last 40 years has shown what it takes for a publisher to succeed in this market. Incidentally, we have offices in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. I came from the ad agency business, and I also worked in research at CBS, and I ran a consumer magazine called Road and Track, the advertising part, I should say. My company is an outsourced media sales company, and we replace a company direct sales force. We're not an augmented sales force. We've represented over 600 American brands, including newspapers and magazines. And we've generated almost close to $1 billion in sales. We only accept full assignments for the U.S. We have historically, this includes research, marketing, and sometimes billing. We also have a consulting business that's pretty active, and that has its own set of employees. And we're currently working with one of America's largest newspapers right now with their ad sales department. Now, I need to click a little. All righty. What did you do? Oh, okay. Thank you. I need you here all the time. So we're on slide. Okay. The next slide, please. We have sold advertising for many international publishers and have done consulting projects for many, some of which are under non-disclosure agreements with regards to us chatting about them. But some of the global brands we have represented include Where Magazine, IEEE, we were in the power and energy area there, National Geographic Traveler. We've worked extensively with Kantar Media. Also with one of my big clients is the American Chemical Society. We run their sales. They're a dominator. Elsevier, MSN, Northwest World Traveler. We have a counterpart here in India for the American Chemical Society, which is RMA Media, which is here in India. Please. So with the American Chemical Society, we sell 64 digital journals. We have one print magazine, which I think has 40 times a year it's published. We have events we sell, newsletters, social media. We do a lot of work in webinars, white papers, and podcasts, which is what our clients currently expect. On Monday, I was speaking to Richard Jameson, the director of New Statesman Media Group, which publishes many titles in London, including New Statesman and Press Gazette. I apologize, I'm having a little bit of jet lag here. I came from New York just a day and a half ago. Anyway, He said that any English language publisher has to grow their business in the United States from both an audience and a commercial standpoint if the publisher has the means. This is really, really important. And we get an awful lot of calls from people who want to come into the United States. But the first question I ask is, do they have a strategic advertising plan? Or do they just want to show up? Do they have an understanding of the U.S. market in categories they're interested in? Do they have need for proper marketing support, which is really key? Do they have research to back up their claims? Have they done that work? Do they know where the location of their sellers need to be, which is based on, and I'll show you in a little bit, where in fact the business really is from the competitive set? Do they have a realistic expectation of revenues in the first, second, third year? Critical issue here. Do they have a plan to adjust their expectations by quarter? In all the brands I've done, it's critical to meet with senior management of the publishing company in order to adjust things that you found that weren't quite right, assumptions you made that turn out not to be the right assumptions. And that includes the positioning of new products. Oftentimes, editorial departments create new products, and then the publisher slams a revenue goal on it. But there's no thought to talk with the advertisers first. Is this a product that's sustainable? Is this something that you can generate revenue from? And then, lastly, I think, an understanding of the United States circulation models as they currently exist. More on several of these issues later. So, I think this has been talked about here. In the US, there's a guy named Dr. Samir Husni. James knows him. He's been a speaker. And he says if it's not ink on paper, it's not a magazine. Well, the next line on that is, others believe that magazine media includes all media that relates to a magazine brand. Yet another would include all publisher activities such as events. By the way, I sit there. I think it's the whole thing, every part of it. For that reason, it's very difficult to get an agreement on the actual size of the American market. I think if you look at Dr. Husney's definition, it's about 9 billion. But if you look at the real definition, the entirety, it's at least $30 billion market. Some media companies no longer call themselves magazine companies, demonstrating the growth and importance of other ways their brands reach their audience. CEO Roger Lynch went as far to say that his company, Condé Nast, publisher of glossy titles like Vogue, Wired, The New Yorker, GQ, is no longer a magazine company. Okay. They have 70 million readers who read their magazine. 70 million. Now, it's true they have 300 million web visitors and 450 million social media visitors, or interactions, I suppose. Perhaps he might have made a better point by saying that Condé Nast is no longer just a magazine company. We are getting more calls from company directs now, big companies, that are actually thinking about going into the magazine business. American companies. It's not what it seems anymore. There's a lot of, the sea is pretty rocky right now. In 2023, the American Advertising Industry Reference Source, which is called SRDS, was owned by Kantar, reports there are 7,500 print and digital magazines, 2,800 consumer books, and 3,800 business titles. Some of the magazines listed are owned by associations, and they may fall into either category. We've dealt in all of those categories. There is no official language in the United States, but different than here, English is spoke and read by 80%. And this Spanish is a second language, which is about 13%. Obviously, that concentration of English speakers simplifies our job in the United States. However, this different issue, time zones. There are 6 time zones, if you include Hawaii in here. The U.S. is made up of Hawaii, Alaska, the Pacific, Mountain, Central, and Eastern time zones. From a global publisher's opening in the U.S., it's important to locate salespeople near their most important prospects. When we were operating Where Magazine, we opened up in Hawaii, we opened it up in all of these time zones, and we inserted 50 people throughout the United States because it was a local travel magazine. That's the one you see in the hotels when you go. Competition. Any global publisher who's thinking about coming into the U.S. better think about not just print, but they better think about newsletters, video, social media, other digital products, events. So when you're looking at the competitive set, it's necessary, you have to look at all of those things. Who's a big deal right now in video, and how much revenue are they pulling out from an advertising perspective? Of course, global publishers contemplating entry into the American market will need to consider many other differences that they will encounter in the U.S., and that includes the marketing area, the periodic distribution, and the role of ad agencies. U.S. advertisers, by and large, buy advertising programs for the United States. A large part of that reason has to do with product distribution. If a U.S. advertiser cannot sell products in other regions, then the expense of additional exposure is wasted. For example, we talked with a large Indian media company within the last couple of years who wanted to explore the market, but ultimately did not make the investment to hire their own people there or to hire us. They had a huge worldwide audience, but only a third of their audience was in the United States. The other third was elsewhere, and they couldn't break it out, and there wasn't enough to sell. A large worldwide audience does not translate into a big U.S. audience. Now, we've gone too far. Go back, please. Thank you. I'll let you know. Thanks. Periodic distribution. Newsstand distribution is much more difficult now. Dr. Samir Husni wrote, newsstand sales fell from a high of 35% in the late 70s to less than 10% in the early 2000s to right now 2%. So it's not a good area to be in. Overall, the newsstand industry went from about $7 billion in 2006 to roughly $1 billion today. This was caused, of course, by consolidation and confusion in our newsstand distribution system, which is a serious mess. Sounds like that's a similarity here to some extent. The role of ad agencies. In the U.S., advertising for most consumer brands is bought through advertising agencies. Because of the importance of advertising agencies, the Elliott Company partnered with Kantar, and we've partnered 4 times, and we have done a study over the last 10 years, 4 studies, of advertising planners and buyers in America. Some of the highlights of the most recent study are that there is no planning cycle. There's no planning season in the United States anymore, or there's very, very little of it. A lot of buys are made episodic. What that means for a sales force is that you get a phone call and they need everything in 2 minutes, right? And but it's not a cycle. It's not October through September as it used to be. It doesn't exist. The best you can kind of get now is quarterly. Planners, this is I think interesting. Planners and buyers are responsible for more clients, brands, and dollars than ever before. They are swamped. 63% work on 5 or more brands. 63%. And 4 clients. Email and video conferences are the top 2 communication vehicles. Well, here's another question we just asked. Hybrid work and how it affects sales. According to media planners at agencies with more than 100 people, none of them, there wasn't a single respondent that said they would be coming back full time. Now, you know, whether or not the CEO of the company allows that is a different question, but that's what they thought. The problem with this, of course, is making sales calls. If you can't get in to see an agency in person, it creates a problem. My friend James Hughes pointed out to me a few months ago that my sales force better ask where these planners live, where they actually live, and then visit them for coffee in their communities. And actually, that's a pretty smart move. And that's a competitive way to actually make an in-person sales call. The earlier studies established that the average media planner is responsible for $31 million. 31 million. When I was a planner at Footcone and Belding, I had 2 assistants per $1 million. By the way, when I was doing it, just a couple of years ago, no, many, many years ago, there were only 6 media type. There were magazines, newspapers, television, radio. Today, there's so many different platforms. And you imagine how busy a media planner is today to examine all of this stuff? Some other observations out of the study. These planners are very, very young. And a lot of times they're right out of school. This is not such a great thing, but many of them don't read or don't read printed magazines much. They're very digitally oriented. There's an issue for training here. They work for long hours. They don't get paid particularly well. So this is something that we in the United States, and if you do come to the U.S. and you have something that's agency-driven, you have to be deeply aware of, which really necessitates the need for proper marketing. This next slide is just I threw it in. This is an example of a big company that's coming into the U.S. They're actually moving a lot of their operation into the U.S. And this is an example on the other side of a company that just left, which was Bauer, which I've done a fair, I've worked with. So, next slide. Media Radar is a company that we use a lot. It's an ad tracking company in the United States. And they keep a database of all print ads and exhibits for all the major magazines and exhibitors in America. And these are some of the ideas, the 3 trends that they came up with. There's been a lot of talk here about artificial intelligence. I'm not going to comment about that except as it relates to advertising sales. As it relates to advertising sales, it's going to create an environment where a seller can reach out to that many more people. And in theory, the artificial intelligence can do the presentation, so there's less time there on the prep side. That's the good news. The bad news is that all the competitors may have this, if in fact I'm correct about that. And I don't know. The result could be that buyers are even more overwhelmed than they currently are. We have, the United States has passed two bills that come up to $1.2 trillion in revenue that government spending. It's focused on chips and science and also infrastructure and jobs. This spending will significantly impact the media industry. It will drive unprecedented ad spending in the industries and local communities supporting these initiatives. These bills will increase employment, travel, business opportunities for America, all of which will require advertising communication. Sponsorship and exhibit revenue is still growing and coming back. Example here. Media Radar's estimate is that it's going to be a particularly robust business for the next 12 months. However, sponsorship pricing is often 20 to 30% above 2019 levels. This particular company has information on all of this for many of the larger exhibitors in America. So smart media companies will have to create and sell unique opportunities. Brands are eager to interact with customers in person. However, we're finding that, particularly with the American Chemical Society, that some people aren't going back to shows, and they are expecting hybrid shows at the same time. So you're running a direct show and you have a hybrid show going on. And the expense is much more than it used to be when you're running two separate operations here. One thing that we do a lot of is brand studio or branded content work. And it's taking more importance in the United States. It's an interesting animal because basically what it is where a seller goes in and they become, in essence, the ad agency almost for the client. We did a massive one, it's $500,000. It's public. It was. I did a seminar workshop on it with a spinoff of DuPont, and so we had a seller, and we had to retrain our sellers because when you're selling brand studio work, you don't go in and sell them something. You go in and be quiet. You go in and shut up. Just keep your mouth shut. And you need to listen carefully to what they say, which is kind of counterintuitive for a salesperson, right? They always want to do the talking, but in brand studio work, you have to listen. And you're listening to the client talk about their marketing needs. And then what you do is you go back and you carve a program. We worked with Ogilvy and Mather on this particular one. We landed it. It was incredibly long process. We went back and forth with the journalists, because Ogilvy would make a change here or there. But at the end of the day, it was very rewarding. And you're seeing much, much more of this. Hearst has a brand studio. National Geographic has a brand studio lab. Some of the bigger B2Bs now have that. And I think this is a good new revenue source, and it's a big deal, but it does take different skill sets. It's a different kind of seller here. So on our brand studio business, we have one person on the Chemical Society that is versed in this, and then we have 3 sellers that are selling, more typical advertising sales. Next, I really like this. The future will not fit in the containers of the past, and I think it's clear, and I think everyone here was talking about it, that a magazine can no longer be just about a magazine. The publisher can't be talking about that. The future does not fit into that container. All publishers who have a print product globally must be able to compete in a business where print revenue is shrinking as print advertising budgets decline, and they must create other branded products and platforms to replace lost revenue. Can I take questions? Does anybody have any that would like to ask me? Somebody has to. James, I knew you'd come through.
I was going to ask, how do you see the landscape changing in the US market? Because we're starting to see money flow away from the big tech platforms and back
Yes.
towards brands. Is that
Yes.
a cause for optimism?
Yes. First-party data, which of course you can sell. And so that's happening more. The good news with the American Chemical Society is we never took programmatic advertising. But we have other large clients that did. But now we are able to go in and sell that. I've had situations. I had a situation fairly recently where I was representing a massive online player. It was Ancestry, if you're familiar with who they are. And we worked with the president. We became their selling operation. And we sold a massive program to an advertising agency in Chicago. I'm talking big. However, unbeknownst to senior management, they had also hired a programmatic company. And I'm just sort of making this up, but it was, say, $30 1,000 kind of deal, and had lots of bells and whistles, and it had a connection with Google and so on and so forth. And this group went in and simply said, you don't need any of that stuff. It's not worth what you're paying for it, and instead, pay $1. And so they undercut us. Now, they were fired the next day. But I think this is an example. I'm not a fan of programmatic at all. I think that's a race to the bottom. And I think first-party data is important. James, there's a further answer there. More and more, particularly in the B2B side, publishers are talking about how to resurrect some of their print products. Now, that's not going to be the focus, but it may be one of the areas. There's a movement back looking at how do we make money here, and we're sure as heck not going to do it in third-party programmatic. Please, anybody, ask me something.
Ladies and gentlemen, I believe due to the paucity of time, we do have time to squeeze in one more question. If any, kindly raise your hands and I shall pass on a mic.
How would you reckon magazines have to position themselves to the advertiser? Now that we are no longer just a print magazine, and most magazines worth their salt are available across mediums, we're engaging communities across platforms. How does one go about selling it? Because, advertisers and agencies are not very keen to listen when, a magazine approaches them.
The answer, I think, is you have to take a look at, through something like Media Radar, how are they buying? Where are they spending their money? And you once you determine that, you then lead with that product. So in the event that they're buying, something on the web, you might lead with that, but then you back into print at the same time. So you sell it as a package. But when they're buying primarily print, then you can lead and do the other way. We actually spend a lot of money in training with our employees on how to do that. So we set up scenarios. And so you lead. But before any of my people make calls on anything we have, they have to do research. They have to know what is that client doing? Where are they spending their money? What is their goal? And then you back into it from that. Is that helpful? Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.